Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the Great Dynamics podcast. My name is Ahmed Hassan. And as always, with me today, I have a very interesting guest. Today with me is Keven Hendricks. He is a law enforcement veteran with almost 2 decades of experience, previously serving as a task force officer for 2 separate federal agencies. He's a published author with the FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin and American Police Beat, and currently works as an instructor for various police training agencies, teaching a class for law enforcement on the dark web and cybercrime investigations. He's also a certified cybercrime examiner and certified cybercrime investigator by the National White Collar Crime Center, and a certified cryptocurrency investigator through the Blockchain Intelligence Group, a certified digital asset professional through the Global Digital Asset Cryptocurrency Alliance, and he's the founder of the Ubivis project, StopDarkWebDrugs.com. Keven, that was a long intro, longer than I expected, but you deserve it. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful intro. I appreciate it.
No worries. So, Keven, 20 years. How did it all start?
You know what? It was kind of a confluence of events. I had always wanted to get into law enforcement. My father was in law enforcement, public servant. Before he had retired, he had been a public servant for 30 plus years. And I'd always, saw myself doing 2 things in life, either being in law enforcement or actually going into archaeology. That's what I went to school for, was archaeology.
Oh, wow.
Mainly because I think I have a very strong religious core, and I'm a very religious person. Roman Catholic, grew up Roman Catholic. And I think I was obsessed with Indiana Jones growing up, and I wanted to transcend that into, finding where all of these religious truths that we all have come from. And I think archaeology was one of those things that interested me the most. And literally, I came to a very big crossroads in my life, my senior year of college, where I could have gone away to an archaeological dig down in South America for probably 6 months. And that would have encompassed my entire senior year of college. And I wound up not doing that. And I began to apply to police departments. And, I almost wound up working for the NYPD. I got to that point where I graduated and I had taken all these exams at the same time. And then it just turned out I wound up working for a state local partner here from New Jersey, where I'm from. And that's how it started in my law enforcement career. And then, as you and I spoke about before this podcast, apparently we're kindred spirits with electronic dance music. And I had been a producer since I was 17 of EDM, house music. I've been an active DJ all through my collegiate career too. And it was funny kind of transitioning into law enforcement role where I continued to produce, and then people started to believe that I was better with computers than I really was. And I kind of got put on the spot where I was offered a task force officer position that dealt heavily with computers. And obviously I couldn't say no. And that is really how this all started with cyber. And that was back in 2013 or 14 is when it really started to mold my career from, the standard of law enforcement to this new world of the cybercrime forefront. And that's really how it all started for me.
Okay. And what was that task force about? What was the goal?
So the goal was the combating of child pornography online. And this was the very early stages of cases that involved the dark web as we know it, specifically the Onion Router Tor, as well as other peer-to-peer file sharing services. So I was kind of thrown in at, I want to feel like the best time. I was there when all these cases were really coming to a forefront. Most people, when they think of the dark web, they think of the Silk Road, obviously, with Ross Ulbricht and how that case was worked. And right around that same time, there was a lot of other peripheral dark web cases that involved the distribution of child pornography and things like that, involving Tor as well. So it was really this melting pot of investigations that were the first of their kind. And I think that right when I got into this is really the most formative years for how cases are now worked today. And the training I had gone to at the time that was available, because there really wasn't anything, specifically involving cryptocurrencies, which were this brand new thing that most people didn't know about if you were outside those dark web circles. And most of the training I had gone to was really focused on counterterrorism. It wasn't really focused on, finding criminal actors, more like finding state-sponsored terrorism and things like that had a nexus to the dark web. And I like to say that's when I really just put my foot on the pedal and I went, and I've never stopped learning. I've never stopped staying active in this space with teaching. I've never stopped continuing to better myself and learn the new trends and learn the new dark nets and learn the new messaging services that everyone's using. And really just, there's one speed, one gear, and it's go. And you really have to learn this stuff and be involved.
I can attest to that, because we've been talking about this for a long time, and I think it might as well just be as a good time to say that we're working on doing a course together.
Yes.
On the Great Dynamics Intelligence School, where Keven will show all of his experience, which I cannot wait for, because I think it's something that is extremely needed, particularly on the cryptocurrency intelligence route. So how did you got really involved with cryptocurrency? When was that, and in what capacity?
So that was right around the same time.
Okay.
The methods for which people were paying for contraband, it didn't matter if it was child exploited material or drugs or donations to foreign terrorist organizations, et cetera, et cetera. They were all using crypto, and at the time it was heavily Bitcoin. And that's when I started to really learn about cryptocurrencies in general, really how they work from a fundamental protocol standpoint, like the ones and zeros per se of these different cryptocurrencies. And since then, it's just been a phenomenal thing to witness just as an advocate, because I love crypto. Like you'd be surprised how many people hate it. Like they're like, oh, I've been investigating it for so many years and I hate crypto, it should go away. It's like, no, it's not going to go away. Okay, let's just honestly come to that understanding to begin with. But to see how it evolved from like this very minimal select few that were using it to like so many people interested in it, so many stories that took headlines about it, just to see this constant evolution from something that used to be so hard to get to now there's cryptocurrency ATMs at like gas stations that I can walk to and buy Bitcoin or whatever I want to. And I think in terms of like, in terms of intelligence, the schools of intelligence and also law enforcement as a whole, I feel like there's been this like almost like a stagnant growth where there hasn't been a lot of understanding about it, where there's many people who still view it as being untraceable. Like you'd be surprised how many times people talk about crypto and it's like untraceable. And it's like, that is the furthest thing from the truth. A prime example would be if Ahmed and I, we went to a bar together and I gave you however much money cash at the bar. Nobody outside of you and me knew that took place, right? That there would be no other way unless you were there to know that. Versus crypto, where it's completely auditable. It's viewed on the blockchain in perpetuity. It never goes away. Like every single transaction that takes place on these blockchains, regardless of if they're quote unquote privacy coins like Monero, or if they're very open blockchains like Ethereum, Bitcoin, et cetera, every single transaction is documented. It's hashed, it's viewable, it's auditable, you can pull it up whenever. And I think that's what people don't understand really, is it's like, no, it's not necessarily so much about privacy. It's about, almost pseudo anonymity. It's like, because these coins cannot function, or rather these cryptocurrencies cannot function without this viewable, auditable blockchain. So for me, sometimes just pulling that veil back for a lot of people that maybe were in the intelligence world for a long time, they're very focused on human, they're very focused even on SIGINT. And it's like when you talk about crypto, it's still this ambiguous thing. It's almost like this nebulous area that very few understand. And it's like, no, this is how it works. And I think once you get that fundamental understanding of it, then you can start to really, one, appreciate it, and two, have the empowerment that you can really investigate this stuff and get a lot of great intelligence out of it.
Yeah, and I think I wouldn't go into how I have like busted my head against the wall for people not listening what crypto can and cannot do. And I want to go a little bit more technical or more hands-on with you on this, because I want people to to also see that like what's out there and what they can learn and what they can use. You then also were part of another task force.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a bit?
Yes. So at one point in my career, all of a sudden I was told I was going from one alphabet agency to another. And I was like, okay. And then I was told that, okay, you're still going to be focusing on the cyber element, but you're going to be focusing on people buying drugs, narcotics versus child pornography and child exploited material. So I'm like, okay. So it was, I like to say, same different toilet, if I'm allowed to use the foul language, but it's true. It literally, the same methodology was being employed, whether it was somebody that was seeking out that contraband in the child exploitive space or somebody seeking out contraband in the drug space. And there was just different elements to how you can investigate the physical side of it, right? Like in child exploitive cases, you're not dealing about something that's like tangible. That's something that exists, files on a computer. How are those files transferred? Versus drugs, where somebody buys drugs online and has to get shipped to them. So there's different investigative avenues there. But in terms of the crypto itself, it didn't change. Just like it was still one user sending to another user or sending to a service, and that being their method of payment. And it was just funny how there was, with these two agencies themselves, how there was basically no framework with the one agency, where it was like there was nothing set up. This was kind of like ad hoc, groups, and almost like there wasn't a very good understanding of it, juxtaposed to the agency I had come from, where it was like there was, these groups were up and running for a while. So there was a lot of framework there. So while I was with the separate agency, I was actually tasked almost with building up like this initiative. Like there wasn't anybody who understood really, aside from a select few there, like how this all worked. And, I was there for over 3 years, heavily involved with not only my own investigations, but worldwide investigations with these dark web markets, and meeting partners all across the world, virtually at least, that were involved in these cases. Because very quickly, right, when you're talking about cybercrime, you're talking about crypto, you're going to be going beyond borders, right? Cybercrime has no borders. You and I talking on this podcast right now, we're across the world, and we're able to do this very easily. So it's like with cybercrime, it goes international relatively quickly. And that's when I was involved with Interpol, Europol, getting heavily involved with the working groups there, and being able to meet like-minded individuals that were very up to speed on this stuff, and very, very much diligent in working these cases together. And yeah, it was something where I had to also further my education, because times were changing. People using Bitcoin changed. It's like now these marketplaces are talking about these new anonymity enhanced coins like Monero. And it's like I had to learn about Monero very quickly. I had to learn how it worked very quickly. And that's when, I feel that I really started to dig into crypto. So this was probably like 2018, 2019 is when I really had to start to get myself to be an expert in this, because it was really me by myself working these cases, and I didn't have the support that was there for the other agency I was with at the time. So it was like I had to basically be my own one-stop shop. I had to basically understand from a ones and zeros standpoint how this cryptocurrency worked, and I also had to articulate to others exactly what I was doing, how I was keeping myself undercover, how I was able to infiltrate these marketplaces relatively easy, because these marketplaces want your business. They don't want to make it very hard to get in versus some of these closed circles with child pornography, where they're very wearisome of law enforcement in general, versus these drug markets where it's like, come on, come on in. If you're an undercover cop, we don't care. Come in, buy our drugs. We still want our percentages. So I was part of 3 very big, well-publicized worldwide initiatives. One was Saboteur was the first one. Then there was, after that, there was Dark Hunt Tor. There was all these other things that have the Tor at the end that was under J-Code, which is the Joint Criminal Opioid Darknet Enforcement Group, under the auspices of the FBI. But that also has a lot of the federal agencies involved with it. And I was part of those. A lot of actionable intelligence came out of that. Marketplaces seized, as well as a lot of vendors arrested and recipients interviewed, intelligence gathered like that. So it was a very, very good time while I was there, and I was able to really hone in my expertise on both cryptocurrency and the dark web and the different dark nets that are out there. And that's really my story.
So fascinating, because I don't know if you can answer this, but could you talk a little bit about like how do these guys make mistakes, or is it
Oh,
inherent to the nature of cryptocurrency that you are gonna get caught?
uh,
So
you
can
know,
you talk a little bit about that? And
Yeah, I think for the most part, there's this perception out there that if somehow you're using crypto in general, you have a level of computer sophistication. There's people that will easily use this term hacker, right? Like, oh, I'm on the dark web and I'm using crypto. You're a hacker. Or this perception that is so prevalent in pop culture of the hooded figure in the terminal room with the terminal screens running different lines of code and hacking all your bank accounts and things like that. More often than not, that is a complete departure from the truth. Money is the big driving factor here. And, when you talk about people that sell drugs online, or you talk about people that are making a lot of money, even with credit card fraud or carding and fulls, selling of fulls and things of that nature, a lot of them are not very sophisticated because a lot of them don't have that computer skill set to begin with. They just got involved with it because it's a very easy way to make money very quickly. And a lot of the people who have been identified and arrested by law enforcement have some, quote unquote, OPSEC issues to begin with. And it's rather funny when I do talk to people in law enforcement in the intelligence circles. I talk about, how sometimes easy it is to find who these actors are without even ever conversing with them, without ever having any type of transaction with them from a crypto standpoint either. It's like you could probably find out who they are just based on their outward facing profile. What avatar are they using? Is that an exclusive avatar for them? Like, where did they get that from? Names that they're using, Telegram handles, all these things, which are all part of that open source intelligence aspect of it. And then when you compound an auditable blockchain like Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the other cryptos that they're preferring, it's like, what can you investigate on that side then? Like, did this person advertise their Bitcoin wallet address in some forum somewhere because they were seeking donations because they were maybe writing their own GitHub code that they were going to distribute to the world, and they shared that address before. And it's like, I came back to this target now who's selling some sort of malware or something on one of these forums, and it's just like I think a lot of people don't understand that. Like, there is a huge difference between state sponsored stuff, right, where you have these very high end actors that are probably the most secure actors out there, and then you have like these lowly criminals who are literally just trying to make money. And yeah, I can't express just how sometimes easy it is to find who these people
interesting. One thing that I always wonder about is when these individuals sell drugs or they sell malware or whatever they do, because they're using a cryptocurrency to somewhat obfuscate the transactions, how do they then ultimately like cash out?
are.
Because that
Exactly.
has to go to you somehow, right?
Exactly. So that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that it's like you win the lottery and you have the lottery ticket. What is that lottery ticket worth if you can't cash it in? Not worth much, right? So in the space that we live in now, specifically with crypto in general and then its adoption around countries around the world, more often than not, people aren't directly transacting with it if they're trying to use it in their normal pattern of life. What they're doing with it is they're sending it to an exchange or some sort of service where they can liquidate that cryptocurrency for their fiat of their country. And again, that's where a lot of investigative intelligence can be harbored, because if you're using a tier one service, a tier one exchange like Binance or Coinbase or any of these exchanges, those are know your customer, anti-money laundering compliant. And again, the easiest way to launder money is honestly with crypto. I use this example when I teach too. If I'm a local drug dealer, I've just made $5,000 for the week, US dollars for the week. But I can't go to the bank to put that in because, again, I'm going to the bank and I'm going to be transacting with cash. And that might raise some red flags, especially if my account never really gets money in it. Like it's just cash goes in, then cash goes out. So if I go to a Bitcoin or crypto ATM and I buy $5,000 worth of crypto and I send that crypto to my account on an exchange like Binance, Coinbase, etc., and then I have my ACH, my checking account linked to that exchange, it's very easy for me to then sell the crypto I just sent there for whatever fiat for the country I live in, and then transfer it into my checking account. And from the bank standpoint, it looks like I'm making that money legitimately through crypto trading. It's very easy to do that. And the very scary Mexican cartels, organized crime throughout the world, they know this too. And it's very easy for them to launder money in a currency that has no borders to bank accounts all over the world, doing exactly the method I just explained. So from a standpoint of law enforcement or a standpoint of intelligence when it comes to terrorist organizations or financing of terrorists, flagging, having certain accounts flagged at banking institutions is very common. But it's like with cryptocurrency, it's a lot easier to mitigate those sanctioned accounts or those flagged accounts by this kind of sleight of hand, having the cryptocurrency sent to whatever exchange and from there getting liquidated and sent to some other account. And that is why foreign terrorist organizations prefer the method of financing through these types of cryptocurrencies. Hamas's campaign in October 7th, that was reported on as being heavily financed by USDT, US dollar tether. So the article I wrote about for Gray Dynamics with Monero, right? ISIS-K was the attack in Moscow, funded by donations facilitated by Monero. And these are like some questions that need to be asked as we move towards this borderless currency.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about cryptocurrency ATMs.
Yes.
That's a bizarre phenomenon. Can you go in a little bit about that? What those are?
So it's kind of like the ATMs where you can only deposit. Like that's where I think a lot of people get this misunderstanding about it. Very few ATMs are cash out when it comes to crypto, where I go to the ATM to do a sale of crypto and then I get cash out of it. Very few are that. Like I would say in the entire world, like probably less than 5% of the ATMs that exist for cryptocurrency are cash out ATMs that allow you to withdraw money. Most of it is depositing money. And those are avenues that are very exploitable because they're very low know your customer compliant. Some require you just to have a one-time authentication text sent to a phone number. Some might require you to hold up a picture and then take a picture, like a ID, and then take a picture of your face as some sort of like referencing to each other. But other than that, it's not very know your customer compliant. But you're paying a very high fee on top of whatever you're doing. So let's just say a standard purchasing of cryptocurrency on an exchange like Binance or Coinbase, they're going to charge, and I'm using very round numbers here, 2% of whatever you do, versus a crypto ATM that's going to be charging you 17, 18, 19, 20% of a fee of whatever transaction you're doing. So it's like, who's really using those? Right? You have to ask that question. Like, is this the honest person, honest quotes, but is this somebody that's using it for legitimate means, or is this person being a victim where they instructed to go there, or is this person a suspect doing the exact method I explained, where I just made $5,000 via selling of drugs, I need to buy this crypto to transfer into my legitimate account and then sell that crypto to transfer it into my checking account.
I have seen those cash out ATMs in Germany before. Yeah.
They're very few. It's like for example, there's no Bitcoin ATMs or cryptocurrency ATMs anywhere in Norway, and I was just there in February. And then I was in St. Martin, and there was cryptocurrency ATMs everywhere. And then I went to Curacao, and there was one on the entire island, and that one was both deposits and withdrawals, and it's very close to where the cruise ships get off. So it's very, it's interesting dynamic too, because when I was just in Switzerland, it was the same thing. There were Bitcoin ATMs very close by where I was in Lausanne, but most of them were just deposit only. I couldn't withdraw money from it. I could only go there to buy whatever crypto I wanted to buy.
Interesting. So you mentioned already Monero as a vehicle of choice, crypto-wise, for that is supposedly anonymous, right?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about Monero and its rise to fame?
Yeah, I love Monero. I'll be very frank. I'm a very big supporter of Monero. So Monero's been around since 2014, and what Monero is focused on is obviously privacy. There are similar tokens to Monero, similar privacy coins, tokens to Monero that are privacy centric. But anonymity is not possible, because anonymity would mean that I wouldn't be able to openly view any blockchain, right? If something were completely anonymous, there wouldn't be an auditable blockchain, because again, you could look anything up on these blockchains. It's just what data is available to you on the blockchains is where the question comes into play. So with Monero specifically, it is founded on Ring CT as a way, or rather the protocol which obfuscates the transactions is Ring CT, which is basically having a bunch of decoy signers as part of a pool whenever a transaction takes place. And then there's also stealth addresses that are associated with the transaction. So in the audit of the blockchain, you can see the stealth addresses, you can't see the amount, and you can see the decoy signers along with the real signer. And in order to figure out who was what, you'd have to have a little bit more information. But from a Monero standpoint, the people receiving from Monero can't see the sending party's wallet address. So it's like a way to also protect the person that's sending to a wallet address. So for example, if I were to have arrested a suspect and they had a Monero wallet address and they weren't sending, they were only receiving, I could only see the denominations that they had received, but I wouldn't be able to see who sent it to them. And even then, there's basically, there's still a transactional hash, but there's also a private view key hash, which allows me to search it in a auditable, viewable blockchain, but I'd have to have that's private key to view it. So it does like a very good job of protecting both the senders and receivers of Monero. And it's not the only privacy coin out there. I mean, there's comparable privacy coins, if not, I feel, more privacy-centric coins that are using different protocol like Mimblewimble, ZK Snarks for Zcash, different elements to it. And with AECs, as they're actually the de facto term, anonymity enhanced coins, because again, they're not completely anonymous. That's something also people got to get out of their head. It's not completely anonymous. When you have these coins, I think they're going to become more and more popular. Honestly, I'm saying that right now, because we don't live in a transaction-based cryptocurrency society yet. We live in more like the investment, right? Like most people who are interested in crypto are interested in it from an investment standpoint. Most people who own cryptocurrency own it from an investment standpoint.
Correct.
But I think as we start to move towards like being used in daily commerce and things like that, I feel the demand for privacy is going to get higher. And with traditional tokens like Bitcoin and Ethereum, that's not really possible. And then you have these other tokens like Bitcoin Cash, which adopted Cash Fusion as a way to protect its senders and receivers, as well as Litecoin, which enacted Mimblewimble as part of its privacy protocol back in 2022. I think more so as we move forward, and maybe it's within the next 10 years, I don't know, we'll see. But I think we're going to have a lot more people concerned with privacy. And I think in that regard, that's when, Monero, that's when these traditional privacy coins are going to become more and more popular. And Monero itself, it is a very versatile crypto. And one of the forks from Monero, Oxen, was actually the blockchain in which a darknet, LokiNet, and the end-to-end encryption messaging service Session is built. So that's a very versatile blockchain. Right now, there's like some talk at Oxen, like whether they're going to move it to a separate blockchain, which would be an Ethereum-based blockchain, but that's a separate podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, there is a lot of versatility that is there when you talk about anonymity enhanced coins.
So I would like to go in a little bit more on the privacy side of things.
Yeah.
So because I think privacy is often seen as a dirty word by people in our profession. That why do you need privacy if you have nothing to hide? Which I think it goes counter to living in a democratic society. You need to have privacy. But when let's say somebody's listening to this podcast and they want to do maybe not even proper investigations like you do, but they want to get familiar with it. But at the same time, they want to make sure they protect their identity and their security. Can you walk us through something some of the steps that they can do to make sure that they are. And this is mainly for people that are investigating on Telegram or on other places like that.
So it's interesting you mentioned Telegram, because Telegram has its own coin, its own blockchain. One of the most top 10 traded coins in the world is actually TON coin, because the open network TON is built around Telegram. And Telegram's TON wallets that you can have on your associated with your Telegram accounts, they offer a myriad of support, whether you're putting TON coin into the wallet or whether you are putting traditional tokens into the wallet. But with Monero, I think Monero, the way it is built, is probably the most user-friendly to be anonymous. Because again, whether you're very familiar with Monero or whether you're not, as long as you got Monero and you're sending it or receiving it, you're pretty protected. Again, the receiving wallets can't see who's sending. Really, the keys to the kingdom is the person who's sending. Like if somebody is constantly sending Monero, you could see the destination wallet addresses, but the people that are receiving can't see who sent it to them. So I would say that, if you're going to get involved with Monero, one of the wallets that I feel is probably the most secure wallet when it comes to this space is Feather Wallet, which by default, when you connect into the Monero nodes, it uses the Tor-based, the Onion Router-based nodes. So it's giving you that protection of not only Monero in general, but when you're reaching out to the blockchains and the meme pools to do your transactions, it's basically connecting into the Tor network. So not only do you have that protection of the Monero blockchain, but you also have the Tor network protection on that, the back end of how your wallet is communicating. And I think that is something that it would be the best avenue if you're very, very hyper concerned about privacy with Monero.
Could you explain, because I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that a lot of people that are listening to the podcast, but can you explain what Tor is?
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. So the Onion Router, Tor for short, it's the biggest darknet and most used darknet in the world. And it's been around since available really to the public since like 1999, 2000. But it was first developed in 1995 by Navy Research Labs about almost a way to connect into websites without being visible from a standpoint of your internet service provider, connecting into a network, and your internet service provider would only see your connection into the network. So they wouldn't see where you were going from there. Quintessentially like we have with VPNs now, right? Like, there's always this argument that the Tor network is just a giant VPN. It's not a true darknet. It's a giant VPN. That's speculative, obviously. But still, for the Onion Router, when we talk about the dark web, most people believe that the dark web is entirely Tor. And what Tor does is it has its own means for you to traverse the clear net, go to whatever sites you want by protecting you, by reflecting your IP address and where you're coming from as being a Tor node, specifically an exit node. And then you could also go to Tor sites, which are .onion domains. They're alphanumeric characters that don't make sense if you don't know what you're looking at. But in the Tor network, it knows to direct you to the site. And why I'm a huge proponent of Tor, like I donate to them every year anonymously, is that it protects both the end user and the site itself. And there's basically 3 hops that you take when you go into Tor. You go into your entry node, you go into your middle node, and then you go into the exit node. The exit node is where your traffic enters whatever site you're going to go to. If you're going to a Tor site, that also does a similar hop to you. So it has its own entry, middle, and exit node that it goes to as a means to both protect you as the browsing party and the site itself. If you're familiar with the Silk Road case, one of the ways that they were able to determine where the site was hosted was constantly reloading it. And because this was in earlier stages of Tor in general, and the site was so popular, they had to outsource the hosting of the site to a service in Iceland. And all the investigators were doing was constantly reloading the site till eventually they saw that IP address indicative of the hosting server. Can't do that anymore with Tor because they realized that was a flaw. So now the sites basically hop to you in the same way you hop to the site. So I find it brilliant. I'm such a huge proponent of Tor, but the other darknets that are out there too, usership of internet, the Invisible Internet Project has skyrocketed over the past 3 years. different darknets now that are around that haven't been around for a while, like the interplanetary file system, interplanetary file sharing, IPFS, Yggdrasil, which came about within the past 4 years alone, which is like a peer-to-peer pseudonymous darknet. And now you also have this advocacy for what's called the small web, which is browsers like Lagrange, browsers like Agrigor, and instead of HTTPS, it's like Gemini protocol or Finger or Spartan protocol. So there's these different darknets that are out there. But for Tor in general, like when you're talking about the OG darknet, that's really Tor, and that's what most people are using. And in the case I just brought up with Monero, just think about all that protection that exists on Tor and then adding a privacy token and anonymity enhanced coin on top of that, and you're really dealing with a privacy-centric user. But again, I could have 1 million Monero. I can't go to McDonald's to buy a cheeseburger with it. So I got to figure out a way to convert it. And most people are doing what's called swapping, where they're swapping Monero for a traditional token like Bitcoin or a traditional token like Ethereum or something like USDT Tether. And then they're finding a way to have that money go back to a traditional exchange where they can liquidate it for funds that they can use. So
there's an interesting concept. I don't know if it still exists. I think it was called Cyclone Cash.
Yes, Tornado Cash.
Tornado Cash, that's
yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? That's an interesting concept.
With Tornado Cash, there are other coins that are similar to what Tornado Cash is, and these are coins that operate on multiple blockchains. And again, the sanctions that went into Tornado Cash and its association with criminal activity as well as state-sponsored stuff, that really brings up the question about, was this really a coin or a token that was designed for that, or was that merely something that these actors were using because it was available for them? And like with USDT Tether, right? Tether, the reporting on it already came out about how much money went into terror-related wallets with Tether, and it's like, that's not Tether's fault. That's not USDT's fault. US dollar Tether's fault. It's just being able to be exploited by these criminal actors and these terrorist actors. So I think with Tornado Cash specifically, we're still in a space where, there's a lot of developments without a lot of guardrails. And I think that FTX was a prime example of that, where you had this multi-billion-dollar exchange that was a legitimate exchange that was committing massive fraud because they were basically minting their own coin and showing that coin as being their reserves, right? Like saying like, this is our liquidity and it's backed by this coin that we made for ourselves. And I think without, with when you have people that really want to get rich really quick and not have to invest a lot of money, of course, there's going to be almost like this gold rush where there's very little oversight. And then when there is oversight on it, it comes down to, well, people lose faith because now there's oversight and it's like, we can't do what we used to do with it. And it welcomes the legitimate parties to use it. Like to say like Tornado Cash, for example, were there people that were using Tornado Cash legitimately? Of course there were, but there were a lot more people that were doing it for nefarious purposes. And I think that as we get closer to what we know as Web3, we're going to have a lot more tokens that are interoperable on different blockchains, and we'll really see within the next decade. Really, like this is history right now. Like I think people don't understand that, especially about cryptocurrency. Like if I talk to my kids about cell phones that I had growing up, the Nokia brick that all you could play on it was Snake. I tell them about like, what? No, that didn't exist. Like no way that existed. Or just like things that have become so necessary anymore, like PDAs and things of that nature. Right? PDA, public display of affection, or personal. what were the ones that?
I know what you mean.
Yeah, where it was like or even like
Blackberries
digital cameras. Like no longer necessary. It's all there now for your phone. So I think right now we are really living in a stage where one day our grandkids are going to come to us and go, tell us about the time when you had to, use a credit card or something like that versus, being able to just send it via your phone, right? Like Apple Pay, things of that nature. Everyone's tapping to pay now. And it's like now with crypto, it's like that's interoperable with it. So it's like, are we going to move to this, society where there isn't a necessary hard plastic or metal credit card anymore? It's all going to be there on our phone.
So sorry to come back to this because
No.
I think this is very important. But could you explain what people were doing with Tornado Cash? Like, what's the trick really, and what were they achieving with it?
So being able to have a token that exists on blockchains like Ethereum that is interoperable, and I believe Tornado Cash was, again, I don't have that much familiarity with Tornado Cash other than the OFAC sanctions and things that went down on it, but it was interoperable with a myriad of blockchains, right? And when you have these tokens that are interoperable with these blockchains, it makes moving the funds very easy, and it makes obfuscating that movement of funds very easy. For example, with USDT, US dollar tether, you can have it interacting and transacting on the Ethereum blockchain, and then all of a sudden it could go right over to the Tron blockchain. And if I were an investigator and I was following those funds on the Ethereum blockchain, all of a sudden the funds have left the blockchain and are now on a separate blockchain. So it's like I now have to be abreast to what wallet that tether went to on the Tron blockchain in order for me to continue my investigation. So when you have tokens like that, it makes movement of illicit funds incredibly easy. And when you have algorithmic as well as pegged stable coins, it's worth $1 today and it's worth $1 tomorrow, versus Bitcoin, which at the beginning of our podcast, Bitcoin could have been worth X, and by the end of our podcast, Bitcoin could be worth something different. So those tokens are very desirable because you're not going to lose money. And if I were laundering money for whatever purpose, if I buy 50,000 US dollars worth of Bitcoin in the morning and I don't wind up withdrawing it to the next day, I could lose money overnight, versus stable coins where you don't have that risk. So that, that at its apex is why those coins are preferred as a medium for laundering money, and also as a medium for obfuscating the source and destination of where those funds are going.
But in essence, if somebody would be using Tether or any other coin for that matter, the question is like, how would you find out what their wallet is if they're not advertising that?
Yeah, there would have to be some sort of sharing, right? Yeah, there would. Again, how are the funds going to get to me if I don't share my wallet?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Hey guys, donate to me. Just don't tell me where to send the money. I would have to share that with you. And then anytime that wallet is shared, obviously, that's when you can start the auditing of funds that have come and gone from that wallet. And most people don't realize this, but Tether, whether you're operating it on Ethereum or whether you're operating it on Tron, it's still auditable in that wallet. And there are plenty of blockchain explorers out there like ETHplorer, ETHplorer.io, or TronScan, where you can view these wallets and you can see that activity on the wallet. So I think for the most part, there is this very odd misconception about cryptos in general, where, like I said earlier, using that analogy, me giving you cash in a private place or when we're together, the only people who know that are you and me, versus something, whether you're using Tether or whether you're using an anonymity enhanced coin, still that wallet address has to be broadcasted, and there's still some sort of auditable activity on that wallet if I know with AECs, like if I have the private transaction keys, or I have the private hashes or the private view keys, there's still ways for that transaction to come to light outside of cash with you and me, where nobody would know about it except you and me.
So coming back to privacy, right? Because I just want to give as much value to the people listening as possible.
Of course.
If we're talking about a toolkit of like maximizing your privacy in your OPSEC, we talked about what crypto, you talked about Monero. What messaging app would you recommend from your experience?
Yeah, so I have a few preferential apps that I would say if you're very focused on privacy. One would obviously be ToxChat. ToxChat is a peer-to-peer based messaging platform. People can't talk to you unless they know your Tox ID, and you'd have to share it. And Tox connects into its own bootstrap nodes as a means to protect you, but you still need like a VPN on top of that because your true IP address is going to be broadcasted on that node. But it's very secure. For those who just want to look it up, tox.chat is the main site for it. A lot of ransomware actors prefer to use ToxChat. I think it's very, very secure. Because again, you don't need like a two-factor authentication. You don't need a text message sent to your phone. You don't need anything to build your account on it. And that's the same thing like I touched on earlier with Session. Session built on the Oxen blockchain, which is an AEC. When you create your account on Session, you get your Session ID, and then you get your recovery seed, your mnemonic seed, and that's it. And unless you share your Session ID with other people, they're not going to be able to reach you. But again, if more people are using Telegram or Kakao Talk or one of these other end-to-end encryption messaging platforms, it's like obviously the more people that use it is what you're going to want to be using, right? Like I could have the most secure messaging service in the world, but if only you and me and Matt are using it, it's not going to be of value to anybody. So I would think in terms of if you really wanted to stay secure, then that's a asterisk what secure really means. I think that those two platforms of Session and Tox are very, very much secure. And I think that those are brilliantly designed messaging platforms. But again, Telegram is a phenomenal, widely used app too. And it's just like, I would say that, if you're really concerned about security and your data in transit, obviously the two I just mentioned, ToxChat and Session, would be the way to go. But if you're just the lay user per se, like you're just communicating with other parties, or from an intelligence aspect, like you want to sit on a channel and see what people are saying on a channel or something like that, Telegram is very, very much secure. And they have their own wallet now with TON. So it's like you've been able to incorporate an ecosystem into the infrastructure of Telegram. So it's just like now whenever you transact with your wallet on there, you're transacting encapsulated within Telegram. So that's pretty cool.
Okay. So if we take another step back from that, what would you say from we're kind of locked in either in Android or iOS.
The great question. Yes.
Yeah. So what do you prefer and why?
I mean, that's such a hard question too. Is there more security? I feel more of a security focused, precedent set with Android over iOS. I feel you can encrypt your phone more with Android. You're able to do a little bit more with Android than you are with iOS. But with that being said, iOS itself, aside from the Pegasus malware and other exploits that they're always constantly trying to close with more and more updates as they come out to update the iOS software, iOS is very much secure too. They do a lot with Apple to protect the end users of it. But exploits that exist for Android, exploits that exist for iOS, they're always going to be there. But I think if it were really like comparative to just those two operating systems, I think that there's more encryption and more protection that you can do in an Android operating system that wouldn't be possible in iOS.
And on the other hand, obviously, I don't think you can emulate iOS, right?
You can.
You can.
It's
Okay.
it's a little bit more sophisticated. There are emulators for iOS operating systems, but a lot of those are built for like test purposes, where like you designed an app and you want to run it in almost a sandbox environment, and you want to do it within an iOS architecture. That's what those are designed for. Versus emulators for emulators for Android, like Nox, BlueStacks, etc., that are specifically designed for you to be using any app that you could download off the Google Play Store. But even then, those emulator rooted environment, which is basically like a jailbroken environment in iOS, a rooted environment in Android, gives you enhanced privileges as the user, and a lot of apps can detect that root, and like they don't like that because they don't think that you're a real user. So that's why you can't use TikTok in an emulator. That's why you can't use Snapchat and emulator unless you're masking the root. So it's, yeah.
It's a whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. This is so fascinating to me. So you talked about Tor, that you like that a lot. Are there any environments like, for example, Tails or things like that you can recommend to somebody that are easily accessible, somebody who's just starting out?
Yeah, if you're concerned about, the environment that you're running Tor in, obviously Tails is designed, the amnesic incognito live system, that's what Tails is the acronym for. It is designed for the least sophisticated usership of a virtual machine, right? A completely sandboxed operating environment that operates inside another environment. I would say Tails is probably the way to go. When you start to talk about VMs and virtual machines and building out, it can get quite cumbersome and sophisticated. For example, when I use a virtual environment, I'm emulating Linux. I'm using an environment that's known as Ubuntu. But even then, I feel that beyond the concern about having a quote unquote sandbox to run this in, Tor itself does a lot to protect you. It really does. Like it's designed for the average person to be able to go online in heavy censorship countries and just view content, right? Like think about living in a country where the government doesn't want you to view something that's counter narrative to what the state is saying to you, right? And you just want to go online, you want to read the news. You want to read something that in Russia that doesn't emulate what the Kremlin wants you to see, right? It's not a special military operation, it's a war. And you want to just view a site like that. That's what like Tor is designed for the average user to go online, to view sites on Tor and protect both the sites themselves and the user. Now, if you're going to start doing things on Tor where you're going to start downloading, or even any other darknet where you're going to start doing a lot where you might be very concerned about compromising your system, yeah, you're going to want to gravitate towards a VM. And I would say Tails is probably the best in that regard. That's very easy to use. It's bootable via the USB, thumb drive, however you want to start it up in your computer.
Well, what other advices would you give for somebody who wants to not just keep their privacy, but also do investigations and do research on these different platforms?
Yeah, it would all depend on what you feel most comfortable doing, right? If I don't recommend jumping into the open ocean if you don't know how to swim. Don't do that. Start little and go as far as you're comfortable doing. And I think for the most part, a lot of people are actually afraid of the dark web in general. As soon as they log on, they feel that, the black van's going to pull up in front of their house and they're going to get dragged out. Or all of a sudden they logged in and now Kim Jong-un and Putin are going to blow up their machine or something in that regard. And that's not the case, right? Just going on there and traversing it and understanding what you're looking for, because again, when people ask me about dark web investigations, well, what are you looking for, right? It's a lot harder to find child sexual abuse material as it once was back in 2014, 15. It used to be a lot easier to do it. Now it's a little bit more closed community, so it's a little bit harder to get to where you want to go. But if you're looking for terrorist related stuff, it's very easy to find. If you're looking for drugs, probably the easiest thing to find is drugs. Drugs and fraud are probably the easiest thing that you can find on the dark web. So understand your mission, understand what you're looking for. And then are you actually going to be communicating, right? Is there going to be a method that you actually have to communicate with an end user? And if that's the case, then that's a separate bridge you have to cross for your operational security. Is this person going to want me talking outside of the dark web, right? Talk to me on Telegram, talk to me on Talks, talk to me on Session. So I feel like if you're going to get involved with this type of space, one, it's very easy to get on the dark web, but two, what are you going to do once you're on the dark web? And then how far are you going to take your investigation? Are you going to be eventually sending funds to this person, right? Is this going to be something where you're going to try to honeypot them by sending them funds to a wallet address they give you and trying to follow those funds or get them to send you funds, right? Maybe you're setting up some sort of reverse intelligence operation or something in that regard. So I feel, having an understanding of your mission in the first place is probably the most important component to it. And then actually going on these different dark nets. And if the actors want you to go on a dark net that you've never heard of before, like when I tell people about Yggdrasil and they're like, what is that? And then I have to break it down to them. And I also have to explain, like, look, the Address is not protecting you the way Tor does. Like, your IP address is being broadcasted, so you have to use a VPN on top of it. So it's just it's very fluid to what you're looking to do. And of course, I'm sure you can share my contact information. I'm available. I love to talk about this. Like, there's few things I enjoy talking about more than crypto and the dark web. Few things.
I know, because we talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
And absolutely, your wealth of knowledge, and I think you've given us a lot of great start points to dig into. I always, because you've given so much advice, I don't know really how much more advice you can give, but I would like to know, what are you at the moment reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Is that also crypto and dark web related?
No. So I love history. I'm actually watching the show Franklin on Apple TV Plus, which Michael Douglas stars as Benjamin Franklin. And they do a very, very good job of being historically accurate, because I don't like where they like romanticize it and like it turns into like Benjamin Franklin was doing dark ops and like jumping in and killing a bunch of people with, like, you know what I mean? Like, they do a very good job of explaining what he was doing during the time of the revolution in Paris, and or rather in France, and like really how he was a pulpit of misinformation to spread to gain the support of France, like basically printing stuff about victories that weren't happening to kind of be like, oh, the U.S. is going to be victorious and then we need to back the United States, So it's just really interesting to me, because again, I think that, he was really one of the forefathers of the United States, but also one of the forefathers of counterintelligence and the intelligence within the United States itself. And I love that show. And I'm also reading a book about the history of the SIS, the New Zealand intelligence service. And that's very interesting too. So yeah, that's somehow in this space.
What is the name of that book?
It's just called the SIS.
Okay.
I'll share it with you. But it's about the history of the New Zealand intelligence service. And it's very, very, very good.
Okay, cool. Any final thoughts, comments that you have?
Yeah, if you're not versed in this space, anything I spoke about to you, get versed in it, because I promise you, you will come across it. It's going to come into your lap eventually. And if you don't think that this is something that you need to have an understanding of, if you have this like very old school mentality of, like, I always bring this up when I first got into law enforcement, it's like cell phone analysis and things of that nature. It was like, you might as well be speaking a different language to some of these quote unquote cops. Street cops have been around for a while. And nowadays it's like everything is like about the phone, right? Like everything is about the phone. And it's like, you could choose to keep this in its own little fiefdom and think that it's something you're never going to come across. But I promise you, it's already there. Like, since you and I started talking, we've already seen things that are just so relevant in this space. And if your focus is intelligence and like, you're really human based or you're more interacting with people based, it's like, yeah, this comes into play too, because more often than not, what is that person that you're in contact with doing? How are they cultivating their intelligence that they are relaying to you? So just, don't view this as it's a very scary thing that very few people understand, because it's just going to become more prevalent.
Yeah, I will tell you that within the intelligence profession, and definitely in human, because I know a lot of them, Tether is beloved.
Oh yeah.
So it's not. Ignore it at your own peril, I would almost say. It's as you said, it's becoming incredibly important for your digital literacy as well as your OPSEC. And thank you for sharing that. We can talk for hours. You already know, but I really appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday morning of all. And for everybody else, that if you guys made it this far, as I always say, please give us a review. I always say this every week. Nobody does really, the listenership that goes up, but we don't get more comments. But yeah, follow us on YouTube and let us know what you think. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.
Cheers.